When you typically think of startups and entrepreneurs, what usually springs to mind? Well, to many people, especially in Israel, they think of young entrepreneurs maybe right after their army service. But that's far from accurate and misses out on a key and vital segment of society: older entrepreneurs with years of experience under their belts. As such, the College of Law and Business in Israel has recently launched a new tech incubator in collaboration with the Ramat Gan Municipality, with an emphasis on entrepreneurs aged 40 and above. And here to tell us all about it is Professor Gal Raz, Dean of the Business School at the College of Law and Business. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, great to have you. So let's start with the incubator itself. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of, how it came into play, because it's actually, it's a little bit about my background. So I came to Israel back about a couple of years ago after almost 20 years in the US and Canada and Australia. So I spent quite a bit of time abroad. I did my PhD in Stanford University in the US, and then I went to Australia for a few years and came back to the US, to Canada. And one of the things that I worked quite a bit when I was there in some of the best schools kind of, in the US and Canada, for example, was on trying to link innovation in Israel with kind of, the US market and maybe even other markets around the world. So I used to work with our MBA students kind of, at Darden and at Ivy, trying to help them get to the kind of, work with Israeli startups to get those startups into the US market or South America or even China.
A very important topic for any Israeli startup. Yeah.
Right, so because I think a lot of startups, so what I found in kind of working with more than 40 startups, is that you have really, we know that we're the startup nation and we know we have amazingly talented people, but I think there is a difference in the talent of what you have in most Israeli entrepreneurs who are, in a sense, very good technologically. They know exactly what they're trying to do. They have the technical expertise, sometimes at a young age. We talk about, right, the military kind of service and all that. But at the same time, when you think about, okay, but who's my market? How do I actually get those kind of, products to the customers? Who's going to be my suppliers? Like all those questions. You do have a lack, especially in the young age, you have a lack of experience in that. And that's where I found there was a good collaboration of getting the students that are actually MBA students, or a lot of them worked for many years, to help those startups that had great ideas but didn't know necessarily how to implement them. Now, when you're thinking about the incubator, so kind of, fast track to a couple of years ago when I came back and became the dean of the College of Law and Business School, I thought, what is the important thing that you can actually bring into a college like that? And for me, it was clear that there are two things, and I think they're kind of connected, and we might talk a bit about the other one also afterwards. One is the collaboration between industry, academia, and government. And for me, it's in the center of everything that you have to do as a business school. As a business school, you have to have those kind of collaborations. And the second one is the issue of innovation. So for me, it was very natural that I said, okay, we have to have a center kind of, around innovation, partly being a global school. So we have kind of, a global program in addition to our Israeli program for undergrads and in Israel. And when we think about the global program, I thought, of course, when I'm bringing students from the US or from other places around the world, I'm not going to bring them here to teach them finance and marketing. I mean, we're doing some great things in those fields also, but I wouldn't say we're the experts in the world. Exactly, they're here for the startup nation. So I think for me, it was quite clear that I have to find a way to, first of all, have a concentration in the school, and that's where we have a concentration now, both innovation entrepreneurship, both in the Hebrew program, but a global kind of undergraduate degree in business is all focused on innovation entrepreneurship.
So students from abroad can come study at the college in a specific degree for innovation and entrepreneurship.
Exactly. The focus, so in a sense, when I go to, I went to the US and I talked to students there, I talked to kind of high school students there and tell them to come to Israel, and I tell them, I've been many years in the US and I know all the colleges, you go 4 years to drink, basically. I'm kidding. I mean, there is some other stuff, but I tell them, well, if you want to go and have the culture of college and all that, I mean, that Israel is obviously different. I mean, this is, you're near Tel Aviv, you have all those benefits, but at the same time, it's not the college experience per se. But if you want to be an entrepreneur at 21, to kind of, to those students, then that's kind of, your chance of actually doing it. Because the program is built on basically getting students, and in the case of the global students, they are younger usually. But the idea is to give them all the experiences of what would a startup go through. So they start by learning all the courses they have to do. They learn about how to build new products, how to develop market research, how to develop business plans, and so on. And the way they do it, and this is really connected to the incubator, which is why it's in the center of it, they do it by working with startups that are in our incubator that we just launched. So the idea is that the students go through the process of first working with other startups, learning from this, and also helping those startups. And then in the third years, they develop their own startups.
So the older, more experienced startups in the incubator are basically working together with the students at the college and you're sort of bridging the gaps.
Exactly. And I think what's nice about it, actually there are two sides. I think it's really a win-win for both sides, because on the one hand, one of the things when I was starting looking at, okay, so what kind of incubators do we have in Israel? And we'll talk a little bit in a second also about the focus, which is obviously more experienced entrepreneurs, which I think is very critical. But one of the aspects that I found that there are some incubators obviously in academia, but not a lot of them actually have completely kind of, connection between academia and industry, both in the advisory board that we have, as well as the students working together with the startups. And the idea here is that you have the students are in a way helping the startups to develop their business plans. As I said, a lot of startups, they have the great technology, but they don't necessarily have the tools or knowledge. They haven't done an undergraduate in business or a master's in business and so on to be able to have that. I think the example we have in a second of one of the startup we got is actually different. They do have some of those experiences, but a lot of them come from a very strong technological background. And then you have to ask yourself, how do we now help them build a business? I mean, we're a business school at the end of the day. We're not giving them technology necessarily that will help them develop the technology better. We're giving them the tool to develop the business model to make the kind of the business better. And therefore, I think that the other aspect is, in many cases, you go to an incubator or you go to an accelerator and you spend 6 months there, and you get a mentor and you get kind of, the space and all that. But you don't really have the day-to-day and the close connections of spending time with somebody that will really go kind of closely into your business. And the advantage we have here is that by the students working on it and obviously learning a lot themselves, you also have somebody specifically for those startups working on your problem every day for those kind of, few months that you are with us.
So you're saying the older startups are basically getting young, brilliant entrepreneurs to come and work with them. They're getting the learning side, but they're getting basically workers.
Exactly. I mean, they're getting people that can help them thinking differently. I mean, I believe that, first of all, anybody can teach anybody kind of anything, right? So it doesn't matter if you're the big professor and you have the students, or if you're in the military and you're the big commander and you have people under you, there is always knowledge that you don't have access to, and somebody else. You need to find out, how do I get this access to this information? But I think here, and by the way, you mentioned, the young kind of, students are going to help. What's interesting is that while in the English program, it is more focused on younger kind of students, our Hebrew program, where we have the concentration on innovation entrepreneurship, actually have some more mature students. And this is part of the reason why we also thought about this idea of kind of re-entering the workforce, this idea of more experienced employees.
And this is a sector that's often overlooked, do you think, in Israeli society, in the startups ecosystem?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things that I found remarkable. I mean, I'm at this kind of age, 45, 46, that you start thinking about, people my age that have so much experience and have done so many things. And you look at all those incubators and all those, looking at those startups and saying, oh, we don't want you, I mean, in companies generally, one of the problems is that people are afraid to sometimes hire employees that are kind of, too experienced, because they're thinking, okay, they'll come here and they'll take my job, right? They'll stay here for a couple of years and then they'll try to take my job. I don't want that. And there is other risks that you're thinking, well, are they going to be technologically savvy enough to deal with the youngsters of today, of the 25, 30-year-old? But when you think about all the experience that you have, and again, in academia, you have people that are more mature, and you see those things, you see how people stay, in the top of their game, at the age of 50 and 55 and 60 and so on. You start thinking, like, are we seriously going to take those people that have 15, 20 years of experience and saying, we don't want to use this experience because you're too old? I mean, this is, for me, just it seemed completely silly that this is kind of the situation in so many places. So when we're thinking about it, and I have to say, I also look at it as something very social and something that helps in the economy in Israel and so on. But I'm just talking about just from the perspective of business. Like, it seems to me this is not good business. Kind of ignoring people's experience, ignoring people's knowledge.
And now you are giving them the chance to flourish and use their experience.
Right.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Of course.